All right. Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. I am delighted, as always, to have Yasuhiko Kimura back. And we are doing he's doing his new series on new spirituality for the future. And today, he's going to be talking about a new topic. I will have Yasuhiko introduce the topic. Yasuhiko, go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, everybody, or maybe good afternoon. So in the first session of this series, we redefined spirituality. In the second session, we talked about new spirituality. And today we want to talk about how we can contribute to the emergence of this new spirituality. Then if people are interested, we can go back to the first and second session and go deeper into many of the things we discussed in the last two months. So people talk about evolution of consciousness, and we are talking about evolution of consciousness today. And I would like to define what evolution is from our perspective. In terms of a new spirituality emerging. So evolution is the open-ended process of learning. Learning is the movement of intelligence in and through which we transform complexity to simplicity in understanding and comprehension. So in this process, consciousness becomes more complex. Consciousness achieves a higher order of complexity, and intelligence becomes more integrated so that the subject of learning or study becomes relatively simpler. And therefore, a radical increase in complexity of the life world and life problems brings about an evolutionary opportunity and occasion for the greater complexification of consciousness and integration of intelligence. This happened during the time of the Axial Age. Carl Jaspers called the Axial Age. And in the time of the Industrial Revolution, the first Industrial Revolution, and this is happening during this period of fourth Industrial Revolution. It happens when society became radically more complex than before, and people are under stress, needed to evolve to be able to cope with those complexities. So if we can successfully meet the challenge of change arising from the radical complexification and integration, humanity has an opportunity for attaining the further reaches of consciousness never before attained, which involves a greater awakening of what we call spiritual intelligence. So in my view, the human race is an experiment in the evolution of consciousness in form in the universe. An experiment. Human race is one of the many experiments in the evolution of consciousness in form. And life is biterminal. Everything that exists in the universe is biterminal. It has a beginning and end. Our life has a beginning and end. Once you are born, you are destined to die. The same applies to human race. So eventually, the human race will become extinct. And the experiment in the evolution of consciousness will continue in some part of the universe. But the experiment that has been taking place on this planet in the evolution of consciousness in form will come to an end. And let's hope that we will fulfill the whole range of evolutionary possibilities that the human race has before it becomes extinct. And modern Homo sapiens came into existence about 50,000 years ago, yes? 50,000 BC, we found the original modern human race. And according to study done by UN, in the last 52,000 years, there have been 110 billion humans. Assuming that we have 8 billion people today, 7% of all of the human beings that ever existed exist today. And in terms of inherent evolutionary possibility, humans 52,000 years ago and we are the same. The difference between possibility and potential is this. When conditions are there for the possibility to become actualized, then possibility becomes potential. So potentials are possibilities with conditions for its fulfillment. So the evolutionary possibility that is present in the human race hasn't changed, but the potential has been unfolding in the last 52,000 years. So about 3,000 years ago, during the period which Karl Jaspers called the Axial Age, radical shift in consciousness took place. Because the society has become radically more complex, that the humans needed to somehow cope with it, being able to survive. The same thing Julian Jaynes talked about in his Origin of Consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind. So we see the emergence of prehistoric philosophers in the West. We have Upanishadic philosophers, development of mathematics, and of course we have a Buddha and Lao Tzu and all those people. New form of philosophy came into existence. Science came into existence. Mathematics evolved. In a smaller scale, something similar happened in the late 18th century during the first Industrial Revolution and around the time of American and French revolutions. New complexity emerged in society and the human consciousness. And in a way, humanity has been dealing with this emerging complexity ever since. The philosophers such as Nietzsche really reflect this complexification of human consciousness. He re-examined, re-thought, and re-evaluated many of the essential philosophical concepts. And they were no longer sufficient So he transvariated those concepts. We didn't become smarter, but we became a little more complex than people before. And today, in this, what is called fourth industrial revolution, where physical, biological, and digital are coming together. The new axial age is bound to take place, externally and internally. So today is the techno-scientific culture and society, the infrastructure makes a new unfoldment of human potential categorically greater. So we are now compelled to meet the challenge of increasing complexity, and the evolutionary biology shows that the kind of stress that we are experiencing is a necessary force that impels and propels evolution. On the one hand, the stress makes people seek security. But while the strong evolved because of it, so it is the survival of the strongest. And as Nietzsche said, what doesn't not kill us makes us stronger. The stronger need to become even more strong. And this process will lay foundation for the new emergence of a new kind of consciousness and spirituality, spiritual culture. So the new spirituality or new consciousness of the future is the unfoldment and efflorescence of the dimensions of human evolutionary potential as yet to be fully realized. Therefore, the new spirituality or consciousness of the future means the new self-realization of the evolutionary human potential on a scale never seen before. So in the past, the Buddha, the Christ, Adi Shankaracharya, or Lao Tzu was 1 in a million. But in the future, we can have the possibility, we will have the possibility and the potential of millions of Buddhas, Lao Tzus, and Christ, and Adi Shankaracharya. The Christ will cease to be the only begotten Son of God, which is a mistranslation of the original meaning to begin with. He was an exemplary, not the only. But anyway. So, that new kind of humans I call Homo Deus, divine human, different from the way Yuval Harari defines it. In my essay, I shared with you, I talk about this. So it will be the spiritually awakened polymatic human. And there have been many examples of the highest spirituality and consciousness, exemplified by people like Christ and Buddha, Lao Tzu and Shankara. Maybe those four are the paradigmatic. Shankara represents liberation, transcendence. from this mundane world to that world of divinity, liberation, moksha. The Christ paradigm is like salvation paradigm. It is also transcendence. Shankara represents Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti in terms of love of the divine truth, devotion to divine truth. Christ represents divinely inspired moral action. So it is a Bhakti and Karma Yoga. Buddha represents awakening. It is the full immanence in this world where the transcendence and immanence are mutually equivalent. It is Dhyana Yoga. Yeah? And Lao Tzu represents a different paradigm. It is a paradigm of mastery. Mastering living, master living in attunement with the Tao in this world. So Shankara and Christ are more otherworldly. Buddha is somewhere between, and Lao Tzu is extremely this worldly. But there's a transcendental element is there, obviously. But anyway, we have those ancient models and paradigms. And we can learn from this in the context of a contemporary evolution of human consciousness. So we need to rethink, re-examine, and elevate and integrate those teachings, which is what you are doing, Shurikan. You can integrate all four I just mentioned into a new model.
Yasuhiko, would you like a little bit of conversation or do you want to continue? I have one question if you want to take it.
Please.
I see this axial age.
Yes.
I see these people. I see mostly the books that we've been looking at, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, Gospel of John. And I see the sensibility there. The way everything is approached is dramatically different from the modern mind.
Yes.
So in some senses, that way of approaching is holistic. It is bringing everything together all the time. It is going back and forth between and bringing everything together. Compared to that, the modern mind seems to be far more fragmented. Can you talk about the kind of the sensibility of these folks from the axial age?
You know, what I'm going to talk about in the next segment will probably answer that question.
Perfect.
And we can go back to that question again at the end of our presentation.
Sounds good.
But you see, that's why I call it Omnicentric Holistic Civilization. And in the last session, I talked about Ontological Immersion. The new spirituality makes us able to immerse ourselves ontologically in different paradigms, including those ancient teachings. So that from that, we will actually absorb their kind of sensibility and their kind of wholeness, intelligence. At the same time, we will infuse that with our kind of wholeness, our kind of sensibility. There's a go this way. So the study contribute, and we contribute to the study and go that way. But we'll go back to that later. And you know, the fundamental shift that need to take place is the shift in the mentality of humans from believing to knowing. The fundamental paradigm shift in spirituality and the human consciousness is the belief-based mentality to the free-thinking mentality. In the past, there's Buddha, there's a Shankara, who are awakened and who generate ideas, originate of ideas. And people consume their ideas, follow their footsteps, and believe in their philosophy without ever really being able to have the same experience of awakening and thinking. And so spirituality up to this moment is belief-based spirituality. Even something like Buddhism, which denies any form of beliefs, has become belief-based religion. Somebody like Krishnamurti, for 60 years, he preached this. They believed in him. It is different from real faith. For example, when you study a Bhagavad Gita, you have a faith in the teaching of Krishna. You don't believe it. You have a faith that, you know, if I devote myself to this, something will come out of this. But you are ongoing and asking questions like Arjuna was doing. You don't take what Krishna says at its face value. But look at the whole world. It is one belief against another belief. The same mentality. Even the atheists, secular atheists, they believe in something. Marxism is a secular religion. They believe in it. Today they believe in the government. Government has become God or church, almost. So this has been my focus in my teaching, is how to bring about the new mentality where people, average people, becomes an idea generator, not just an idea consumer. How to transform the idiosphere from concentric to omnicentric. So this involves not only the intellectual, but psychological freedom from external authority. You see, in Hinduism, you can become equivalent to Brahman. I don't know humans in human form become identical with Brahman. In Buddhism, it's called Mahaparinirvana. Buddha achieved Mahaparinirvana when he died. He reached Parinirvana, which is a complete equivalence with Brahman. You really embody it in your human form, in infinitude. You really become infinitude, which is not infinite as such. But anyway, but in the Christian tradition, you can never become God. I'm talking about exoteric teaching, not the esoteric teaching, exoteric teaching. Not only that, you cannot even become the begotten son or daughter of God. It is an exclusive privilege to one man. God is always somewhere. And it turns into an external authority. But since it is the unknown and unknowable, priest as an intermediary becomes external authority. And when we look at humanity as a whole, 8 billion. This morning it was 7.9 billion humans. Majority of them, their mentality is belief-based. So new transformation that needs to take place is each human transform himself or herself from idea consumer to idea generator. External authority dependent to claim internal authority. When I use the word authentic means you live your life on the basis of your own internal authority. And you become the author of your own life. You don't follow the script given to you. You write the script and you live the script. That's what it means to be authentic. So the belief mentality is the use of the information processing intelligence first, primarily, and secondarily, the use of the interaction, the reason, without what we call intuition, imagination, and spiritual intelligence. So to move from this belief mentality to authentic mentality, our intelligence needs to evolve from information processing and interaction or reason alone to have the intuitive, the imaginative capabilities and moving into spiritual intelligence. Sri Aurobindo's supermind is this intelligence between information processing and interaction and pure spiritual intelligence, what we call intuition and imagination. But you see, originally, intuition and imagination were intellective intuition, imagination. And then when this intuition and imagination begin to gain a momentum and power, it switches itself into spiritual intelligence and spiritual imagination. So it is really in between. It's a super mind. But super mind is a continuum of more intellective intuition, imagination to more spiritual imagination and intuition. And then you go into spiritual cognition. And that capability is in everybody. And we must move humans out of this belief dependence into free thinking mentality, authentic mentality. So I have written a brief essay on Nietzsche's nihilism. And in essence, the nihilism is this. So you believe in some ideas about meaning of life, value of life, purpose of life, whatever. And you come to realize that's empty. What is empty is not necessarily the ideas. It is, or ideas invalid. It is empty because you are not there. In your ideas, in your beliefs, you are absent. So nihilism is actually good. Now, for the first time, you're realizing you need to be a little bit present in order for you to know that you are absent. And you begin to question the beliefs that you have. And we will talk about this maybe in the future. Eventually, you become your own idea generator, sense maker, meaning creator, and value creator. That's how you actually transcend nihilism. It is not an idea you have. It is who has that idea. So to me, it is extremely important for people to study Nietzsche and go into his notion of nihilism and many other ideas. And he will make you think and rethink. To me, that is the primary function of philosopher, to make people think. So that's number one. From belief-based mentality to the authentic mentality. And once this happens, obviously, new spirituality of the future is the omnicentric, because it is no longer concentric, guru and the follower, but everybody is the awakened free thinker. So omnicentric spirituality and the new civilization of the future that is created by those individuals will be the omnicentric, holistic civilization, because people's mind and consciousness will be holistic, which means the sovereign individuals forming a community or society of integral sovereignty. Now, existing paradigm and in the creation of freedom or creation of spiritual community is in the West, in the East, it's basically they are focused on the inner. And extreme was, I'm only focused on the inner. There's nothing I can do about the outer. Then a little more evolved ones, well, inner is a base, then outer. So I need to be absolutely free to be able to create a free society. That's Eastern. Western is totally ignore inner. They are not even aware of it and want to create external freedom. The people who are more aware from external, create an external freedom, then human will become more free. Buckminster Fuller's idea is that, change the environment, then people will change. What I am proposing is different. It is simultaneous, inner and outer. So we are on the path of a spiritual evolution and achievement of greater and greater inner freedom. Then you start to change the environment. So when you see where you live and the kind of association you have with people is no longer conducive, you will find a place and a community that are more conducive to your own spiritual growth. You change the environment. This environment is not only physical environment, but the idea environment, idiosphere. The kind of books you read, the kind of conversation you have with people. So you need to change the environment in order for your spiritual growth to continue. And society exists for humans, individuals. It is not individuals exist for society. We, human race as such, is an experiment in an evolution of consciousness. And each of us is an experiment. We are an experiment and experimenter. And this is, cosmically speaking, this is primary than society. So we create a community so that it is conducive to the people's spiritual evolution and certain degree of external freedom is necessary for inner freedom to continue to grow. Unless you become a Buddha, then obviously you can be in jail, you can be internally free. But otherwise, the freedom is not going to evolve. And this is very important. This is an individualistic approach to society. Collectivism says humans exist for society. No, society exists for humans. And each individual exists for himself and for other humans. That's the basis of ethics. So you want to create develop a network of like-minded people who share the same commitment as you, creating a community or society that are conducive to our own spiritual evolution. which is the purpose, cosmic purpose of our existence. And at this time in history, the system that exists, the paradigm that exists today in the creation of and the maintenance of society is not conducive to spiritual evolution. So we will need to create that kind of community outside of existing system. So locally, you have your friends with whom you share the same commitment. And globally, through cyberspace, you have a community. You know, you have a community, actually can't. I have a community. It is essential to find a place to live which is conducive to your evolution, and find community or create a community that is conducive to your spiritual evolution and mutually help one another in the spiritual evolution. So the emergence of such a community, society, and eventually civilization is by necessity an omnicentric, self-organizing, and spontaneous order-generating movement of creative evolution, in which no single leader, no single center, and no single centralized control exist. That's the difficulty. In the past, we had a guru, we had a leader, and he come up with something, or he or she come up with something, and people follow. And this is a design of spontaneous order is different from design of a controlled order. So this emergence is the phenomenon of free, autonomous, autodidactic, polymatic, and spiritual sovereign individuals coming together in co-creating a community, society, and civilization for oneself and for one another. So for this emergence, basic fundamental freedom is assumed. That is to say, not everybody is ready. Today, far from it. So freedom is the absence of compulsion internally and absence of coercion externally. And both compulsion and coercion are forms of control. So when compulsion is absent and coercion is absent, when control is absent, what is present is spontaneous order. So freedom is order without control. And this really scares hell out of people. So for this kind of emergence, the individuals will have to have attained a degree of inner freedom. And then they will come together freely to form a community without any centralized control. And this is true democracy, which never happened in the whole history of humanity, because democracy requires that the people be free, autonomous, and self-governing. And at the same time, the spontaneous order arises in the state of being at one with the whole. It is not free will. I deny the existence of free will. I affirm the existence of freedom, a spontaneous order. And spontaneous order is the movement of the whole that is necessary. That is necessity. Spinoza's necessity meeting Chang Tzu's spontaneity. So truly free human knows and does what must be done. And what must be done today is to involve as many people as possible who are also free to co-create a community, an idea sphere, which will lay foundation for the emergence of omnicentric holistic civilization. When that happens, what is called the age of imagination will come. And today's fourth industrial revolution will create a societal infrastructure in which we will be freed to pursue our own creativity, our own imagination, and our own spiritual evolution. So this is a different kind of transhumanism. And AI, in this new kind of transhumanism, is not just an artificial intelligence, but it is an alien intelligence, alien machine intelligence, which is radically different from human intelligence, so that we can work with AI in such a way that what has never been possible in the past can be made possible. And there are many more we can say, but maybe this is an aspect. And when I came up with this idea of omnicentric holistic civilization, I thought maybe around the year 2080, we will begin to see the initiation of such societies and civilizations. So we have 60 more years to go.
Wonderful. Yasuhiko, is it okay to start taking questions now? All right, folks, if you have questions, you can either raise your hand in Zoom or you can go ahead and type !mark in chat. Try to keep your questions concise so we can get to as many questions as we possibly can. All right, give me just a second here. We're going to start with Ron. Ron, go ahead. What's your question?
Yes, thank you, Yasuhiko. Very clear thinking on your part. My question, you used the words, the evolution was maybe from going from believing to knowing. And I want to offer an alternative language and find out if we're actually talking about the same thing.
You can ask, try to keep it brief and just ask a question. Go ahead.
Never mind. I can't be that brief.
Okay. All right. Take 1 minute. Go ahead.
I like to offer the language of going from knowing to not knowing. If you use that language, you can explain the four masters that you taught all fit very nicely into that language of going from knowing to not knowing. Does that language in any way feel like a language that you could also impart your teaching?
Well, coming from a Zen tradition in which one Zen master said, not knowing is the most intimate. And I have actually written some essay about not knowing. And in the most fundamental sense, the only honest statement the human mind can make is that I don't know. But you see, so you know that you don't know. And you see, from believing, when people are in the mode of believing, which is accepting an idea from others, accepting idea coming from without, which is not simple assumption, made to be truth, and not rethinking, not questioning that idea, keeps them unaware that they don't know. So you see, as Socrates' life says, and many Zen masters says, and many sages says, you come to the point, and Nietzsche's nihilism the same way, you come to the point when you begin to have the glimpse of awakening and knowing, you come to know that you don't know. Then you begin to dissolve your beliefs, start to question and dissolve the beliefs. And they begin to know for the first time, really, authentically. The knowing is always limited. So when people begin to think for the first time, they realize that they don't think. When people begin to know for the first time, they realize they don't know. And so long as we stay in the mentality of beliefs, we will not have an opportunity to know that we don't know. And we don't think. So I think you and I are talking about the same thing, but that's what I meant. And this belief mentality and the believing mentality is so deeply, deeply programmed into the human mind today. It has thousands of years of, history. So it is a huge task individually, and much more huge task to actually do it in a larger scale.
Thank you.
And in school, that people get indoctrinated, inculcated. They start to, their brain, the mind become filled with beliefs. So the whole system that exists today are designed to make people believers of one thing or another.
Thank you. Next up is going to be David, followed by Laura. Folks, go ahead and type ! to line up for questions. David, go ahead.
Yes, thanks very much, Shrikant. Thanks, Yasuhiko, for another wonderful conversation. My question is about tribalism. Tribalism is very fundamental to human beings. As you mentioned, been human beings for at least 50,000 years. And you have this wonderful idea and vision. I was wondering how if it's possible to actually create this in the world because of the current human nature of tribalism. If you think this is going to be replaced, you said, by AI, or that a group has to completely be removed. I mean, how do those two pieces fit together with this wonderful vision and the inherent tribalism in humanity and in psychology?
Yes. Now, how do people form tribal affinities. In the past, it was blood. Yes. And I come from a country that is still very tribal. Because Japanese people are very polite. They don't express their tribalism or racism as blatantly as Americans. But in my own experience, now I can see Japanese society is more racist than American society. And they're more tribal than Americans. And Japanese tribalism comes from this 1,000 years of inbreeding the same blood and speaking the same language. So, and human beings have an innate need and want to be with others. So it is not the tribalism, but how the new tribalism is formulated. Personally, my affinity to Japanese people is much less than my affinity to those people who think like me. Not that they agree with me, but we are thinkers, share same ideas. So friend, Americans and Europeans, all kinds of friends, of Japanese included, friends. My own tribe is not based on the blood anymore. So in a way, I'm suggesting before the global tribalism, we want to form a new kind of tribe who are people are based on, their tribalism is based on their shared commitment for spiritual evolution. And also, it is not based on same beliefs. You see, another way of people holding tribe is the belief systems. So Christians and Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and so on and so forth. Within Christianity, there are many different sects, and Buddhism the same way. So it is a blood or belief. So my new tribalism is not blood, it's a commitment. Their shared aspiration for something. Second, it is not based on the shared beliefs, which means shared opinions. It is based on something else. Again, it is you see, so I have many friends who are devoted to spiritual evolution. Our good friend Nietzsche, for example, he has found Sri Aurobindo. For him, Aurobindo's path is his path. We have another friend, Shankara. They haven't gone to the same college for some reason, but for him, Krishnamurti is his path. Of course, they are highly intelligent and thinking people. They don't just follow, of course, but their affinity. And many of us have different affinity to different teachers. And so in details, we may disagree, but we are aligned in our aspiration and we can mutually stimulate each other. I learn from Shrikant so many things. I learn from Nietzsche from so many things. I learn a lot from Shankara and many other people. So this new tribalism is a omnicentric, or at least polycentric, holistic community coming together in alignment beyond agreement to the ongoing spiritual evolution of oneself and the rest of the people.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yasuhiko. Next up is going to be Laura, Ellis, and Jyoti. Laura, go ahead. What's your question?
Sort of a question when you have these groups that sort of splinter, kind of have belief systems that are very different, yet they sort of in their own way follow the same pattern in terms of how they evolve. And they can, in some ways, be viewed as dangerous in their philosophies against, sort of the more prevalent one. How do you deal with that? And you have to allow it to continue to grow, but it can become sort of something that can almost be viewed as, a threat to your belief system. And so how does it work when that happens?
You see, unit of community or unit of society is not people. It is communication.
Mm-hmm.
When communication is absent, there is no community. You may see the gathering of people, but there is no community and no society. So unit of society is communication. The communication, of course, consists of speaking and listening, but more importantly, understanding. So as Luhmann says, Nicholas Luhmann says, communication is a structure, a system of utterance and understanding and information. So in order for us to create a community, essential feature is the presence of communication, which means we need to be able to express our thought freely, and we need to be able to understand the thought of others. And when you look at society, oftentimes you see there's a two-way monologue going on. There's no dialogue. There's no actual understanding. Two people are talking, but there's no understanding. So there is no real communication. So there's no community society. So we want to pay attention to this. And it takes certain state of consciousness to be able to understand different perspective. It really requires what we call ontological immersion. You need to set aside your own model and paradigms, assumptions, and understand the person who is talking and look at the world from that perspective, which is possible. So it is ontologically immersing yourself into the world of others. So understanding is actually rare. It is not common. When as I was just saying speaking with Ron about the knowing and not knowing, when you begin to understand, you see how much understanding is actually absent in society.
Wonderful, thank you. Next is going to be Ellis, Jyoti, and Mark. Ellis.
Hi, I'll be fast. Thank you for this teaching. So yeah, you've been answering as I was waiting. As personal growth and spiritual growth, what percentage of it is done individually? Like I found that the more I'm growing, the less people I can relate to. And then I've gone back into my books, kind of replenishing myself. But then at the same time, you say there's the opportunity to meet and your like-minded community. So how much, let's say maybe you as an example, how much is the time spent with, personal self-reflection and growing that way and seeking community and growing with others? Is it equal or is it one is better than the other at this time? Kind of my question, but maybe you can get it, T.
You know, it is an integrated movement or integral movement. And for example, at night, you know, I'm being myself, being with myself. And early in the morning, I'm being with myself more, obviously, than with others. So it is not like a 50-50 going all the way. It is a movement. But you need to have this both in your own movement of spiritual development. And you need to speak with people. You need to make an actually conscious effort to seek out not only the greater teachings through books, but seek out your friend. You know, in Buddhism, there's a concept, Maitreya. Maitreya is a future Buddha. Depending on the scripture, how you count. You know, Indian way of counting is different from the way we count. But anyway, future Buddha, after the Gautama Buddha died, there will be a future Buddha, Maitreya. But Maitreya means something like friend. That's a very, very insightful. I have never read anywhere people say this, but it's very insightful. Future Buddha is a friend. So we are future Buddhas. We are friends of each other. So you need to seek your friends and have conversation, have communication. And that's when communication happens, communities start to develop. So it is not the percentage of which it is both. And some week, I'm all by myself. You know, I can be alone by myself easily. And someday I'm with a lot of people, some weeks with a lot of people. It's all moving together, but it is not this or that, or which is more primary. They are both primary.
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Jyoti, Mark, and Ever. Jyoti.
Hello. I totally agree with your pointers for building a strong community based on your, ideas, spiritual ideas, and what have you. And I might have asked you this question last time too. I'm a community person. I do have 3 different groups of people from different sects, and I'm in a line with them. But two weeks ago, I did a spiritual well-being. They were not for it. And I know as much as they trust me and as much as they like me for who I am and what I do in the community and how I help the community grow and what have you, I was so shocked. They would rather go for the antidepressants than meditations. And there's no question about talking about internal work. I'm learning such beautiful things in bhakti yoga, karma yoga, and what have you. And my point was not to sell these ideas to them, but just to get them acquainted with them, the peripheral, the center, and what have you. Very nice about it, but they were not, I could just tell that they were not interested in it because they said they're on a quick pace society. They have to do a lot of things done. This takes a lot of work and they're not even willing to look into it. And that's where I meet the roadblocks. They are very good friends. I go out for lunches, dinners, all that is good. But here where the buck comes to end. So if you have any tips for me, I'll appreciate. If not, I'll just carry on.
I have a friend who is like you. She is also entirely alone where she is. I don't know if you're married or not. In her case, she is single, so she is completely alone. There was really nobody to talk to. So her community is primarily, spiritual community primarily online. And probably she will move to a different place where there are more like-minded people. I don't know about you. You need to really listen to the movement of the whole, of which you are part, with this intention of your own spiritual evolution and evolution of others who are ready. And listen to the movement of the whole, and you really start to get the idea as to how you want to, where and how you want to move. You may change where you live, or you may start doing something in such a way that you will have a group of people around you who are like-minded online. And from there, things can evolve. So whatever it is that, you know, I cannot give you exactly, but, you know, you want to really listen to your inner voice and the voice of the whole. And you begin to do what you must do to move forward in your own evolution and in the evolution of humans who are ready.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Mark and Sue. Mark.
Thank you. I've already posted in the chat that we're really resonating with what you're saying, Yasuhiko. It's profound. My one concern when you said 2080 might be the timing, the unfoldment of this broader awakening, this consciousness of humanity, which would really bring about a common perspective about each other, about the world, about the source of being, the source of creativity. Where does this come from and how to tap into it? My 5-year-old grandchild will be 75 years old. And I thought back in the 1990s that we were on the verge of a grand spiritual awakening across the planet. I thought my father would live to see it. Sadly, he did not. And now I'm thinking, in light of your comment, that I may have to pray for my granddaughter to be alive for the awakening. And I want to be as facilitative of her openness to this seeking groups of common aspiration for spiritual growth as I can be as a grandparent. So is that date in your understanding just kind of out of the air, or do you have something that we don't have in terms of a prophetic,
See to the future.
seeing the future? Thank you.
Okay, on the superficial level, it is actually not that deep. I had this vision of omnicentric civilization around 1980. I was very young still, which really became formed before 1990, but 1980. So I said, okay, it will take maybe 100 years. That was all there was in the beginning. So please don't take this 2080 too seriously, please, okay? I said, maybe it will take like 4 generations. So my child generation, and then it will be fast, and then 3 more. And after the 4th generation, there will be something. Now, in the deeper dimension, this kind of evolution has a different time scale from our lifetime scale. And look, in the Axial Age, it's actually, you know, pre-Socratic philosophers, they are before that. And then go all the way to maybe, you know, Aristotle and Epicurus. There's about 200 years, 300 years. And last century, Walter Russell, Sri Aurobindo, Peter Ouspensky, J.G. Bennett, Maurice Nicole, and of course, George Gurdjieff, they all are saying this. This is 100 years ago. So there's a time scale that is not our lifetime, number one. And now, observing humanity today, there are two possibilities. The Great Reset transhumanist agenda may be realized, in which case there will be a devolution of humans. And it will be more like an early extinction of humans. Or we can resurrect from this. And I think my sense is we will. In which case, my 2080 was not that bad, after all. And so you see, what you and I are transitional humans, a bridge between old and new. So our job is to do the experiment, not only with our own lives, but with the building of civilization, Omnicentric. So your experiment may involve 100 people. My experiment may involve only 20 people. Doesn't matter, the number doesn't matter. We want to do the experiment in creating this. And that will gradually spread. Different experiment by different group of people. So what you and I can do is that experimentation. And all that we experiment, and we make mistakes. Since I have already tried 4 times since 1990. Oftentimes it is because of the lack of money, but fundamentally it is a lack of number of people. The number was too small. And I did not know how I can expand. You see, I can write a bestseller book on omnicentric civilization. Then that defeats the purpose. Defeat the purpose. Then, I become the famous author, a leader, and then that is not going to, I may publish a book just before I die. So we need to do, the idea needs to be spreaded, but there should not be a center. So there's a difficulty doing this, actually. No gurus, no leaders, self-organizing. And you need, how you design self-organization. One is well-functioning communication. And you need to tune into the people who are like you. You may disagree on many different things, but fundamentally aligned in your commitment to the greater evolution of humans individually and together, and alignment there. And talk to them, and then begin to create an experiment. The more there are experiments, the better. And in the next 60 years, those experiments will become more and more common. And eventually, we see larger civilization.
Thank you, Yasuhiko. I want to make 2 comments.
And also your question that we want to talk about.
Yes, so I want to make 2 comments here, both for Mark and for you, Yasuhiko. One of my favorite quotes from Ayn Rand's Romantic Manifesto is that anyone who fights for the future lives in it today.
Yes.
So when you are actually, consider this conversation, right? We have lived in that kind of thinking during this time.
Exactly.
And there is a sacredness to the present moment. And it is by doing things right in the present moment, that future is built. There is lots of things about the world we can't control, but what we can do now, in whatever scale we are capable of, we can control, and we can do that. And that is real, and that is very powerful. And in that sense, we are actually living in it now. What do you think, Yasuhiko?
Yes. We are living the future. And we need to live in the future. Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Aver, Mike, Sue, and Olga. Aver, go ahead.
Thank you, Shrikant. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the talk, Yasuhiko. I wanted to clarify a belief or a premise I have. Earlier on, you described the difference between going from knowing to unknowing, or being able to free ourselves from that knowing capacity. An idea I have is that you need to develop a sense or judgment for what folly is. Would you agree with that, or have
yes.
I not off the mark?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aver. Next up is going to be, let's first check up on time. Yasuhiko, how are you doing? Till what time would you like to go on?
Well,
another 20 minutes.
Normally it is 2 hours, yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to check in with you. Okay, next up is going to be Mike, Sue, and Olga. Mike, question, please.
Question. Well, the question about the timeline that was discussed by several people, and that about what's happening in 2080. The timeline compression that's going on right now, the person who will live 1,000 years old has already been born. And so this is kind of an extrapolation of a variant of Moore's law. Taken to that, they talk about the water glass, the pessimist, the optimist, and the realist. The opportunist comes in and says, I already drank the water.
Wonderful. So, Mike, what's your question?
Well, my question is, do you think that the future is already here, but it's probably not equally distributed, and it'll probably never be? Thank you.
Great question. Go ahead, Yasuhiko.
We need to be aware of human tendency to imagine and fancy utopia. And utopia will never come. That's why it is called no place. There will be always people who are against something like this. Right now, it may be 0.1% of humans, or 1% of humans. The percentage will increase. But there will be always people. Whenever there's an evolution, there is an anti-evolutionary force going on. And fighting or playing with that force is an essential part of our growth and evolution. There is always evil forces. And dealing with evil forces is a part of our wisdom. So we need to develop a wisdom to be able to play with the evolutionary, diabolical, and evil forces. And gradually, we will have something different from what we have today.
Thank you. Next up is Sue.
Okay, thanks very much for this talk. It's wonderful. And my question about what was discussed a couple of questions ago was how do we find each other? How yes. do informal groups find each other? Yes. And I feel that if people are already on an interior journey and asking those questions on their own, involved in different kinds of meditation, then I think that it would be easier to find each other. Mm-hmm. And my question is, do you feel that something like the pandemic, 2 years of the pandemic, has accelerated the ability for people to find each other because of Zoom, and that it will change what church and what groups and informally learning in ways like this? Has it changed it forever?
Yes, it had an impact. And as I said, strong got stronger and weak got weaker. So the strong people used this challenge for their evolutionary advancement, and weaker people got crushed and they became more enslaved to the system than they were before. So in a way, this is separating the strong who can go on from the weak, who do not have the capability or willingness or readiness to evolve. And those who have become stronger, they found this as an opportunity, the crisis to be an opportunity to find one another better. So in that sense, because you are strong, you found more people, me too. And, but weaker people, some died, some are, languishing in their loneliness. And you see, the strong people can withstand being alone. And alone means all one. So when you're alone, you become more attuned to the all, the whole. And we want to bring people together who can actually endure aloneness without anybody else. Then it is not a joining the group. It is really a coming together.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Olga, followed by Brian. Olga.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very much for this talk. And my question about a balance between experimenting and guidance and leadership. Because experimenting, especially when we talk about young people, could be very dangerous. Some people would like to experiment and with good intentions in something very dangerous. And for example, someone decides—
That's good. I think, Olga, the question is clear. Let Yasuhiko answer it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You see, when you do scientific experiment, the experimental scientist goes through years and years and years of study and training. Same is true with the spiritual experimentation. 5-year-old, 10-year-old, even 18-year-old have not had enough experience to be able to experiment with this. Probably people need to be at least into their mid-20s to late 20s to be able to actually experiment with this. So until then, definitely people need guidance. And it is a part of the creation of community. You want to really, guide young people in this. Your children and their friends, it is essential. Then when you become able to experiment with yourself, you definitely want to exchange notes with your friends. And some people are more advanced in some areas than you are, and you want to get the guidance from those people. But those guidance is not the following. You experiment with their guidance. It is self-initiating, self-responsible. So that's my response to the organs.
Wonderful, thank you. So next up is going to be Brian, and then I have two questions for Yasuhiko. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, I had a question. When you were talking about, free autonomous self-governing, and we've been studying the Tao, and in the Tao, which was guidance to the rulers, many times they say, basically leave the people alone, don't try to coerce them, don't try to do too much, and the people will do fine on their own, as long as you don't impose on them. Mm-hmm. I was just curious if you felt that they had kind of a similar sense to what you're saying, in that the people will be able to take care of themselves.
Yes, Taoist teaching in terms of society and politics is all for spontaneous order and self-organizing spontaneous order, which is completely opposite from most political science models. And I am Taoist in that sense, absolutely, yes. I want to be left alone, and so I will leave you alone.
Wonderful, thank you. And Yasuhiko has a great translation of Tao Te Ching that we've, that we read. Many people read from it during our Tao Te Ching meetups. All right, so Yasuhiko,
yes.
I'm going to take my question and make it a two-part question.
Yes.
First is about the sensibility of the axial age. And second, the follow-up of that. And I want to separate both these. First is about the nature of the sensibility during that time. Second part would be, whenever we look back, as you are rightly saying, that we can learn from a time of the past, but then we have to integrate it with what we know, because we know a lot more than Lao Tzu. And
Absolutely.
We can do, our situation is much, much better than Lao Tzu, and the kind of potentialities we have today are just incredibly more. So we have to integrate that into something to produce something which is going to be higher than what is there before. So first question, let me elaborate. Whenever I look at these people that you named, like Shankara and Buddha, or look at the works like Tao Te Ching, Gospel of John, or Bhagavad Gita, I see a sensibility which is radically different from what I find in most people around me in America today. They tend to be far more kind of quote unquote materialist, focused on just doing certain things, very much focused on their habits, very different way, even the way in which the kind of questions they raise, what they're aware of, the sensibility or the way in which their consciousness operates seem to be different than all these four different consciousnesses put together. All these three works from India, from the West, and from China seem to have a commonality. They have something which is different, radically different from the modern mind. What is it?
Well, number one, they have an entirely different relationship to nature from the way we relate to nature. Actually, since the Industrial Revolution, people began to move to a city more and more. And the amount of time we are exposed to machines and city life and buildings that are not necessarily in tune with nature. We have lost the sensitivity and sensibility toward nature. We are actually separate from nature. Overwhelmingly artificial cultural construct in which we live. And there are people like, Christopher Alexander, who is an architect, who actually create an architectural structures and propose a way of living that is actually in tune with nature and the wholeness. So their sensibilities are the sensibility of those people who are intimately tuned into nature, and ours are not. So, one of the simplest and also most important message of Taoist is to return to nature. Now, nature is not just outside, inside, human nature in the sense of physical, biological nature. And you see, we eat things, we drink things, we consume things, and we eat in the way that are not natural. I don't know. Look, for example, in America, people eat egg and bacon for breakfast. Now, it was propaganda originally. They made egg and bacon as a typical American breakfast. Before that propaganda, Americans didn't eat bacon and egg all over the country. And actually, maybe eating such a heavy meal, already body become insensitive. I don't eat breakfast. I eat once or twice a day, listening to my body's intelligence, which is much smarter than me, and eat what my body wants. So that's number one. I think fundamental thing is that they had a different kind of consciousness with respect to nature, within and without. We have become too artificial in many ways, and that we need to somehow find a way to go back while being able to play with computers. Mm-hmm. Yes. So,
would you say that is the heart of it?
Yes, and also, secondly, since the beginning of Age of Reason, human cognition, and you see, human beings relate to reality through cognition. And cognition has sensation, perception, and conception. Since the time in the Industrial Revolution, but the Age of Reason, the space that occupies conception has dramatically increased. And so as we relate to reality, most people are relating to what is called narrative reality. It's a psychological reality created through language and beliefs. And they don't actually have the connection to reality the way people used to have. Even the highly advanced intellect of the past, they, in relating to reality, their sensation and the perception had a much larger space occupied than we are. Today, the average intelligent person will have more conceptually oriented than the geniuses of the past. This is another aspect of what I said So you see, ask people what reality they live. They live in narrative reality. They live in psychological reality. They are not in touch with reality itself.
Beautiful.
And look, now they have these devices, so I'm talking to you and I'm doing this. Now you are here, not here.
Right.
So it is a narrative reality within narrative reality. And that had a negative impact in our sensibility. And actually, in order for our intelligence to function optimally, we need to regain the sensibility and reclaim the rightful place for sensation and perception, and put the conception in its also rightful place. It has occupied too much of it.
Let me connect this to another observation you're making.
Yes.
You know, we had somebody talk about Aquinas and his cogitative sense of how kind of the intellect forms ideas from percepts and then uses them to form judgments and drive action. So it is the conceptualization properly seen is this loop going back authentically by yourself from percepts to concepts.
Yes.
Now, the classic example of what you're talking about is, I was really stunned to find this. You know, I'm not that familiar with the Chinese thinking of today, but I could see it very clearly in the Indian thinking and the thinking in the West. You know, we were studying the Bhagavad Gita and the Gospel of John. The fact that they are integrated is obvious as soon as you try to commune with these texts directly. But most of the people who quote unquote believe in it actually are operating very differently. They are simply taking the results. It's kind of, they're like intellectual or spiritual Marxist. They're saying goods are here. Okay. Goods are here in terms of concepts that I don't need to think about them myself. I have these words. And they are doing everything based on, you know, you can call those are beliefs and rituals. So it's kind of combination of beliefs and rituals which have replaced actual operation of the spirit.
Yes, you see, that's why the beauty is extremely important. You see, goodness and truth and beauty, you know, in my essay, Project Beauty, I talked about some of the mathematicians and the physicists. One physicist says, you know, he came up with some equation which was not accepted by his peers at that time, but somehow it was so beautiful that he kept it. And after a few decades, when the rest of the physics community advanced, eventually that equation was accepted by those people. So he says, between truth and truth as accepted and beauty, he will always take beauty. And the beauty is perception. You know, when mathematicians come up with some theory or equation, whatever, when it is beautiful, it tells you there's profound truth to that theory. And the beauty is not fair conception, it is really perceptual. Of course, you need to have a highly developed mathematical knowledge to be able to feel. You know, one of the meditations I gave to my students in the past was to look at the imaginary number, root of minus one, and then look at it and start to feel it, the majesty of that number. And so you see, conceptual development is not necessarily against perceptual development. If you do it in the right way, higher conceptual faculty open up the consciousness in such a way that you can feel the beauty perceptually, which those who have not developed that much in that dimension cannot feel. That's why Richard Feynman says that, you know, unless you know mathematics, you can never know the beauty of nature. And so artists will play an extremely important role today and into the future. That's why, you know, in my email to you, my group yesterday, I said, you know, so in Hindu, you have the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And now we want to add one more. How do you say?
Kalakar.
Yes, artist.
Artist.
Yeah, and we want to develop all 5 dimensions of a being, but the artist will play extremely important role into the future. That's another subject, but it is very important. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's take the last question. It's amazing what, you know, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Jesus, and Shankara did. And, you know, you have tremendous respect for them. But we are living in a time which is actually much better than theirs, objectively, in terms of, firstly, we are 8 billion of us, which is a lot more. And we are actually can be in touch with a good percentage of those if you choose to do that. They did not have that ability. So we live in we are tremendously prosperous. We have much longer lives, all kinds of, you know, we have tremendous prosperity. It just goes on and on. What is possible? What can we learn from these people, and what can we integrate that with to make it greater?
Well, that is a subject that we need to have separately from something like this, because Absolutely. It is such a huge subject. Mm-hmm. But number one, just briefly, mm-hmm. If we creatively use the technology we have today and we are developing today, each one of us will have much more time to devote to something other than making a living and doing something physical. And therefore, we have more time to study and more time to dedicate ourselves to our own spiritual evolution, along with the enjoyment of life. And then we can explore more and more of our creative potentials that we don't have time today to do. And this was the vision that Buckminster Fuller had in 1960s. And he proved in 1970s that humanity today has enough resources and know-how to create a society of abundance, and in which people will become free from so-called making a living and uncreative physical labor. And that hasn't happened yet, although he said 1970s they could do it. So that's number one. So we'll have more time. And look, so more people will be able to dedicate their time for spiritual evolution. Look, I don't know about Christ, but you know, Shankara was Brahmin. Mm-hmm. He didn't need to make a living. So he devoted all his life and his genius into spiritual development and teaching. So he had time. Second, in our course, we are talking about geometrical logic. And there are possibilities of many, many logics. Not possibility, but actually many logics. And we can have an access to, or we will have an exposure to, an opportunity to learn different forms, different kinds of logics, and many more kinds of logics than people ever had. So Indian people, probably as a whole, most gifted metaphysically and mathematically. But it is one culture, in that sense, the monological culture. Chinese had a monological culture. Japanese had a monological culture. West had a monological culture. Now we have a polylogical, polymathic environment in which we can learn different forms of logic and different forms of language and different forms of ways of thinking, which was not available to any one of those great geniuses. So synergy will take place.
Yes.
You see, so what happens? So Buckminster Fuller defined synergy as a movement of the whole, a behavior of the whole, unpredicted by behaviors of its subsystems, taken separately and observed apart from the whole. So you learn Christianity, you learn Judaism, you learn Buddhism, you learn Taoism, and you learn this and that. When those come together, your mind as a whole system evolves, integrates and evolves, but outcome is the unpredictable. And that kind of synergetic evolution of our knowledge and intelligence and consciousness become available because of this polycentric nature. Mm-hmm. So synergy is the behavior of the whole systems that are unpredicted by the behaviors of their subsystems, taken separately and observed apart from the whole. So we can see the systems, Buddhism, system Vedantism, system Christianity, system Taoism, many other systems of thought. Bringing them together, each becomes subsystems of our consciousness, whose evolution is unpredicted by oneself and others. So it will be an amazing blossoming of our human consciousness. And not only that, now you study mathematics, you study poetry, the whole things come together, and this polymathic environment will be a synergetic environment. What will come out of this is entirely beyond our imagination, which is so exciting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasuhiko. On that note, it's always delightful to have you here, and we will see you in a month. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.